nothing survives.
Now, Ron, let me ask you this because you've hit on something here, and this is something that I have struggled with over the years, and for other reasons, okay? But you're bringing this up in reference to food supply, being able to bring your yard and your soil back from the brink of extinction, basically. Um, these companies that put these products out, you would think that they no pun intended that they field tested this stuff, okay, on actual soil to see what the results would be. And how do they?
Yeah, they went out to kill a weed with brown stuff, and yep, it killed the weed.
Okay, but no one bothered. No one bothered to. Yeah, no one bothered to sit and look to see what the environmental effect would be as far as with animals or humans. What would happen as to what this stuff is?
No, well,
our bee population is
sitting on the FDA. You have no fear. You just put out whatever you want because it's in their best interest to look the other way because they're on the board. They make money at the sale of this death.
Something just now a moment ago where she was talking about the bees being affected by this, and I don't think that people
nearly extinct the honeybee.
Yeah, I don't think that
I don't think it was the Roundup. I have a very sneaky suspicion it's what they're spraying in the air to deflect the sun and stop the greenhouse problem. Well, yeah, that's where I was headed. We don't know what's in those chemtrails.
Well, actually, we do. There's barium, strontium, and aluminum because they've tested the soil, and you get even aluminum is deadly to human beings. It can cause Alzheimer's, and you get it on the plants, and the animals eat that, or the insects, or the bees, and then they die.
Well, I don't think our local beekeepers, you cannot support them enough. Only buy local bee honey. Do not buy it in a grocery store. There's a whole process involved with that, but support the local beekeepers. They're going to be replenishing these supplies as they can get their hands on them and giving us back our honeybees. But the great thing is Mother Nature has almost foreseen this. There are thousands of pollinators in Mother Nature's gift bag. And regardless of what happens, they're still going to be pollinating out there, and our plants can still potentially survive. The honeybee just happens to be producing something that is so closely needed by humans, which is the royal jelly, that we really don't want to lose the honeybee. And without supporting the local beekeepers, we could very well potentially lose all of that.
Right, and I don't think that people fully realize the effect of what happens if your bee population is missing because of the cross-pollination that they do when they go from flower to flower and plant to plant. And they're actually they're kind of like part of the reproductive process here for these plants, are they not?
Right, they're part of the food web. They're part of the chain. See, the difference between Mother Nature's gift bag of pollinators, which just kind of blow in with the wind and blow back out with the wind. Bees have a memory, and they will return year after year to the same fields to gather what they need and gather what they're hunting for. It's not necessarily that they go by scent; they know where they're going. It's almost like it's self-programmed into them. And bees will continue to return. As long as the fields are there, the bees will return. And what we're finding especially in the organic farms, and I can't praise them enough for their information, is when you go to plants, just like when you schedule your garden and you plant so that your small plants are on the south side and your really tall plants are on the north side, so that everything can get sunlight. Also plant flowers to run to fruition so that no matter what you have in season, You are continually bringing in the bees to continue pollinating, because some plants, like tomatoes, have different cycles that they will be producing flowers and producing more fruit. So do other plants. So you have to kind of schedule your world, bring it all together so that you constantly got a reason to call in the honeybees.
Right. Did you know that one type of flower is the dandelion, but it's not really a weed. It's actually the whole plant is edible.
Yes, yes. It's actually very helpful. It's there to fix a soil condition. And I didn't go into that hardcore into the book because I'm trying to write a book and deliver a message that the millennials purchasing these new homes, getting into these new houses, can understand they don't have to run to the chemicals. It's not necessary. We can do this with Mother Nature and just follow her guidelines. She does it in the forest all the time without our help. No one's out there with a rototiller doing anything. Everything is natural.
You know, I think it helps more than just millennials. Well, it does help them. It's an easy go-to book for them, but it also makes it simple for us older folks. That
absolutely.
needs yeah. So I found it very, very easy to read. It was very easy to read, and it's not like it's not. You don't have to go into all the technical stuff. It's just plain, simple, common sense.
In most cases, and it's just lost knowledge. And there's some quirkiness in there, and there's some tweaks in there, and there's some additions to if you want to supercharge things. Because to just go Mother Nature's way, it's a nice process. It's a slow process. It's a 90-day process. Can we suit that up and make it a little quicker? Absolutely. We can make it a little bit stronger, a little bit better. It's still Mother Nature's way. It's going to happen in her time, in her process. If we force too much, we go back to chemical dependent plants again. We have to let Mother Nature come back and help.
And we already are seeing where that's taking us.
Yeah, if we're going to force the issue, we're going to end up with the GMOs and just keep right on down that track. I'm sorry, but I like to have healthy green grass in my front yard that I know I'm breathing great oxygen. Because when you're breathing GMO grass that has no root base, that doesn't go anywhere, that barely sits on the top, half inch of might be soil in your yard, you're not breathing oxygen. You're breathing something from a plant that isn't producing anything.
So
how many times have we seen in flooding situations where trees fall over and they have no root ball? It's this flat process where the tree just tips over and there's no roots underneath it any longer. They've all died off. It's this chemical spraying.
And I've seen those trees after big storms, especially if the soil is saturated with rainwater, if it's been raining and raining and raining and raining and raining, and then you have some high winds that kick in, and then all of a sudden these trees tip over, and it's like all of the roots look like they're just horizontal. Okay, that there's nothing that's
spread
actually
out across the top. Everything from underneath has been burned out. The chemicals have done the attack, and they burned all of that stuff out. It's almost a deliberate process. Somebody schemingly went through and did it. It's just too weird, and it's happening too many places for us to start looking at this a lot more closer and go, something's really wrong. It's affecting the trees directly underneath. That all of the roots have to be up in the top of the soil to find anything. Something's wrong.
Let me ask you this, Ron. What, in your opinion, do you think would obsess companies or corporations or whatever to delve in this type of Frankenstein type science where they're creating this stuff? There's really little to any nutritional value to any of it. And as you mentioned before, you're growing grass that just kind of sits on your yard, and it's not really contributing anything to, as you put it, the eco cycle, okay, of what's going on around.
Well, let's and I don't want to just keep picking on one. Let's just go with let's go with a company like Bayer. Bayer has started getting into some of this weed control stuff. So they're giving us this weed control. Well, yeah, I was trying to not keep picking on Monsanto, but going that direction. There's big money involved. So now we're breaking down all of these oils and breaking them down to their basics and breaking them down to their chemical basics. And we're going to start selling them to our customers at the store level to take care of their yard. And interestingly enough, as sick as we're getting, Bayer also has medications on the store shelves to help us with these ailments we seem to be suffering from all of a sudden. So not only are they giving us the ailment in the front end to handle a weed or do whatever, they're giving us something to help us maintain our quality of health in the store, because now we've given ourselves this ailment. And then when you take that one step further, it's taking us right to the operating table where they're just maintaining our health. So they're getting us from table to table, whether it be right from our front yards that we're paying for, right from our grocery stores, right up to the operating table. They're getting us all the way across. Now you tell me, who's responsible? Big money? Because that's what it looks like.
I would say so.
Yeah, that's what it certainly looks like.
And the only way is to step outside the box a little bit, look at it for what it really is, and step back into nature's shoes and go, how can I help Mother Nature? Because this can be turned around in 90 days, very simply, with just an understanding of what Mother Nature does.
You know, and one of the things that we have talked about on this show before and other shows under this network, Freedomizer Radio, is of growing your own garden, you know, and that is stepping outside the box. What your book does is helps that. It helps put everything in perspective. It it tells you some of the things you have already in your house that can already start helping that.
Right. All of this knowledge was given to us a long time ago. When the Pilgrims came over, the Indians tried to teach us this, but in our arrogance, we looked the other way. You know, the Indians, and I'll go back to them again later, but the Indians, when they grew maize, did you know that those corn crops, those stalks, those plants were recorded anywhere between 16 and 24 feet tall and could handle windstorms like nobody's business and not have to be held in place because the root base went just as deep. And now we're lucky if we can see an 8 or a 10-foot stalk. And it can't handle wind at all because it has no root base. It's thriving on chemicals. It's a chemically dependent child, and it cannot survive.
You know, it's interesting because I've driven through Pennsylvania, and especially when you get into central Pennsylvania, you have a lot of cornfields in Lancaster County and, and heading into some of those areas like that. And I've noticed that when I drive through those areas, they plant the same crops, it seems, almost every year. Okay. I mean, there's fields that are just corn, that's all that they grow is corn. And, and then there's some other fields where they're planting other things. I'm not sure exactly what they are, but the corn obviously is recognizable. But isn't there a danger to constantly planting the same crop over and over and over and over and over again on the same ground? Or is that just kind of folklore, or is there something to that, or is there something more that we're not aware of?
You're right on the money, and any farmer that you walk up to worth a grain of salt will tell you crop rotation. You cannot continue growing the same crops in the same location year after year because what those crops need depleted from the soil. And we've done that across the entire country and depleted everything. We're not putting it back.
So
my solution and my design puts it back, and you don't need to crop rotate.
So these farms, these huge farms that are growing row after row after row after row after row of corn, okay? And I've seen what you're talking about, where these stalks are about 8 foot tops.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't know how many ears they're able to produce, but if they're depleting the soil like that after year, how are they able to grow this stuff? I mean, the only thing I can think of is, are they doing it artificially, or?
Yeah, they're coming in with the NPK process.
Oh boy! All right.
Yes, they're coming in with the chemical process, and they're following their state-run agencies' recommendations and just amping up these plants on basically a false steroid. Because if you walk up to any of that soil and you try to stick your hand in that soil, it is so hard that you will break a finger trying to go 1/8 of an inch into the soil without a shovel. You walk over to my garden, bury your arm in it.
So let me ask this question, maybe a bit controversial, okay? But if you have farms that are doing this year after year after year after year, and all they're simply doing is they're dumping the chemical fertilizers in there, is what we're getting as a food product almost equal to a genetically modified food?
Yeah, you're getting NPK food with no nutritional value from your grocery store.
Wow. So even though they can say that it's not GMO, it really is kind of GMO because of how it's grown. Wow.
Because it's living on the NPK standard, nitrogen, potassium. And it's absolutely terrible for us. Look at the obesity, look at the autism, look at the issues that we're dealing with globally. And it's because of these foods.
Wow.
There are organic farmers, and there are many, many up and coming. It's incredible what's coming. And they're struggling with this, but they're finding that as you cross a field and plant 3, 4, 5, 6 different potential crops, all leaning on each other. That's a hard way of saying that, but in my book, did you happen to notice where I talked about some of these weeds and how reading your soils is important, and how clover is just a loss of nitrogen. And as you amp up the nitrogen, clover naturally goes away. Well, clover is right. Clover and a few of these other plants that should be planted in these fields will bring those nitrogen levels up naturally, and there's no need for a chemical. And it'll give the plant what it needs naturally, not a chemical. It covers the soil with a blanket of armor, of nature's armor, of green that stops erosion, that stops flooding, that allows the food web to return. Yeah.
Well, something about clover.
Look at where clover pops up.
I don't. Yeah,
look at where it pops up in places where there's a lot of clay and there's not a whole lot of grass, because nature's trying to protect itself and put nitrogen back in those areas to help the grass expand into those areas and begin growing again. And here we are with a clover killer.
And here I thought that, I had a whole bunch of good luck charms in my yard.
Yeah, well, actually you do, because it's naturally trying to bring the nitrogen back out of the air and pump it back into the soil, because it doesn't thrive off the soil. It thrives off the air.
So these plants actually...
Go ahead, Rudy.
These plants actually then are more than just, I guess, like an annoyance or whatever, or a bother. These plants are actually fulfilling a specific natural function. Is that what you're saying?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Weeds are not the enemy. They're our friend. They will tell us what's wrong in our yards and in our gardens. if you just understand them and you look at what's really going on. Now, yeah, and I provided a way that if you want to be a beginning gardener and you want to deal with your weed situation as you're getting things going, there's an all natural way that you can wipe out all weed seeds in your garden bed and give yourself a fighting chance to not have to be out there every day pulling weeds, and give your plants a better chance. That being said, all these weed seeds that are out there are just waiting for the correct soil conditions before they go active. You go out there with a rototiller and turn your bed over, you may be causing the weed seed to go active just because you created the right soil conditions. Mother Nature has put all of these seeds out there and all of these weeds out there to repair soils, to help soils, to help trees, to help everything. Part of the food web. Anywhere you go that you see abandoned cities, look how many weeds are out there destroying buildings that man has put up. Mother Nature knows what she's doing. We're in the way. If we just understand what she's asking for and why the weed seed pollinated, we can correct that condition in our soil and get even better performance out of our soil because we're helping Mother Nature do it faster.
So is there...
So no, weeds are our friends. We just have to understand them.
Your book lists a whole bunch of minerals and stuff that the soil does actually need, and you list where you could get them. But what I mean, if there is one thing that start off with that you have in your house, what could you start off using?
I would start with my coffee grounds. I would start with my table scraps. I would start mixing everything into those soils. If you want to look around and find other things, cardboard boxes with no print on them. Great source of hardwood minerals.
Oh, really? That's a good idea.
Leaves from all over your neighborhood. Go raid your neighbor's trash. Go help your neighbor rake their leaves. Bring them home. Bury them in your garden. There are so many minerals in all of those colors that your garden is going to thrive. The food web is going to go absolutely crazy over. And when you stick a plant in there.
I was just going to say, a long time ago, I heard something that said when you mow your grass, you shouldn't scrape up the grass cutting.
The grass clipping?
Because it fertilizes, it fertilizes the yard.
There's a few different theories there. I don't tend to believe that. When you go through your different seasons of the year, you really don't want those grass clippings there, which is your thatch level. You want your soil to be able to get its sunlight, to get its air, and to get anything you might be adding, and also its water. If you put a heavy enough blanket of dead grass clippings down in your yard, that stuff's going to run off. It's not going to get a chance to get to the food web and to feed the soil, to feed the topsoil, and move on. That always becomes an issue. The what?
The leaves are okay?
No, you still want to get the leaves up too. I gather all of it. I see, and that's a lot of places we've gotten away from this idea of gather your resources and compost them. And the trick to composting is 123 degrees. As long as you can get the center of that pile to 123 degrees and get out there and rotate it and keep it at a 50% moisture level, you're going to be turning out something that is absolutely incredible for your flower beds, for your trees, for your tree lawns, for your gardens. And that is a mineral-rich soil that the worms have come in, they have left their castings behind, they have digested all of this. It's going to be teeming with the food web and just make your garden rock and roll.
So for composting, okay, because I understand like what she was talking about, because that's kind of always been what what people were told, like, don't rake your grass up. But I understand what you're saying, though, that at some point, these grass clippings act kind of as a insulator on the soil, to where it's preventing moisture to get in. Okay.
Right. Well, it's right in the winter. You want that blanket to help protect the root base. You want that blanket in the winter. So, you're going to be going from your, say midsummer, fall, and you want to be mulching all of that. And you want to be leaving those grass clippings down. You want to cut your grass a little bit higher so you can have a little bit thicker bed of this down. But yeah, to have the idea that you always leave that stuff down, let's stop and go back to what we were talking about earlier, and that's with the chemtrail spraying, and that's with our cars and our oil industries and our jet planes and all of our factories spewing all of these wastes out into the air, and it's settling on our yards and eventually down into that thatch level and sitting there waiting. What's it waiting for? To help wipe out our food web? It's not a great idea to always leave it there. It should be removed at least once a year. Take that away. Do you actually want to keep that for your mulch, or for your compost pile? No, I would very strongly suggest throwing that away, sending that off to the dump somewhere. Let somebody burn that. Even better idea. But there's no way that you need to not always leave the it's not a harmful thing. You don't want it balled up everywhere. You never cut your grass when it's wet, because it balls up that way and it doesn't work correctly.
Right.
But if you adjust your grass cut level and you adjust your grass cut height, and I address that in the book as part of like the scheme of how I go through my year and how I cut my grass to get it to thrive so well and to do what it's doing. And that's by allowing it to grow. Sometimes allowing taller grass gives it that chance for those roots to take a break and just be roots. And then when you go and cut it short again, especially when you're getting into the high heats and this scenario or that scenario where you want your shorter grasses, you're actually telling your roots, go deeper, go find water, go protect yourself, because I'm taking the blanket of the green away. Anytime you expose the soil to direct sunlight, you're possibly causing yourself a problem. So you strategically want to be doing that throughout the year.
Well, okay, so the sunlight, I would imagine that the sunlight would be good for some plants, but you're saying that it wouldn't necessarily be good for the soil?
Well,
there are certain
if you can hold that thought, if you can hold that thought, I need to take a break real quick. And when we come back, if you can answer that, I'll be right back.
Okay, yeah, great.
Did you know that every time you swipe your debit card, those behind-the-scenes transaction fees make the big banks even richer?
More commercials I can't broadcast. Ugh. So what's going on, everybody? Anything good? Well, since no other messages are noticed, yeah.
It's a win-win-win for everyone, except the big banks. Groundswell is about to launch its first cards into market, and we're inviting you to be part of this movement as an investor in the company. Go to refunded.com/groundswell. Set up a free refund account. Invest in Groundswell today and get your money on mission.
How would you like to make your work more enjoyable, be more creative and relaxed, all while sitting at your desk? That's exactly what my Serenity
Sure did.
did for me. This revolutionary footrest.
Facebook.
I can't even call it. traditional footrest advocates emotional expenses, I found that I'm unconsciously digging my feet into the long, soft grass strands of the Serenity Rug. It delivers an incredibly relaxing sensation that closely resembles the feeling of an exotic foot massage. If you have ever had a foot massage that made you want to stay there for hours, you know what I'm talking about. If you have not heard about the Serenity Rug, check them out at serenityrug.com and join the exclusive Serenity Rug community and enjoy a feeling of comfort and relaxation that most will never experience. They've sold out before, so I suggest you do your feet a favor and grab one of these. Again, that's serenityrug.com.
The host of Politics and Prophecy on freedomizerradio.com, the show that
These commercials are just ridiculous.
Enlighten those that seek knowledge and truth while exposing lawlessness and wickedness within our society. Monday through Thursday, 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern.
I'm trying to cut the commercials,
It's the time you can join me and my guests on freedomizerradio.com.
Not much. And Folger sucks.
No, there's nothing else up on
Things
the
seem
shelf
to
in
be
the
going
store.
wrong in the
All right.
world today. Every aspect of our lives seems to be under attack sometimes. Many struggle to make sense out of it. What is really going on? Identifying the problem is critical to any solution. Many people claim to have answers. But what is the truth? What works? What has worked in the past? History does repeat itself, and you must learn from it. You have choices. We cannot change the course of history, but we may change our role in it. All roads
There we go.
all roads lead to the kingdom of God. The question is, which way are you going? Join us to make sense out of it all in the Sabbath hour, 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time or 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, for an iconoclastic.
Oh, you're my starlight.
Today, and tomorrow.
Of course I'm going to do that.
About the key of the kingdom.
Okay, are we done with the commercials?
Call in our live number at 319-527-6208. That's 319-527-6208. Press 1 to participate on the air.
Welcome back to the Delusion Solution Live Radio Show with guest Ron Neitzel, and Rudy Smith is my co-host. Our calling number is 319-527-6208, and our website is freedomizerradio.com. You can listen live by clicking on the green button, the listen live button, and you can participate in our chat room. So we want to welcome everybody who's listening and participating in one form or another. Rudy, if you could, you asked a question before the break. You want to ask it again, so to refresh everybody of what it was, and then that way Ron can answer it.
So we were talking, I think, about, we had mentioned about the soils and the mulching. And the question that I was going to ask and get into was and I guess what I was leading up to. If a person wants to compost something, because you had mentioned something critical here about the temperature being at 120 degrees or 123 degrees, is there a secret to somebody being able to do that? And that's kind of what I was leading into right at the end of our last hour.
Well, as you bring out certain things from your house, table scraps, coffee being an incredible trigger for this process to get started. You're calling in the microbial life, and it comes in and it starts attacking and it starts eating all of these different things that we've put out there from our table scraps. This is the trigger point. And everything else that you've brought together, whether it be your twigs, your branches, ground up mulch, leaves, grass clippings, all of that stuff brought together with your table scraps and the microbial life going to work, which is the food web. As it starts to do its thing, those temperatures will rise naturally. Middle of winter, -30 in greenhouses. They're using compost piles to keep those buildings warm while they're housing their chickens in just basic plastic greenhouses. it produces that kind of heat naturally, and it's the microbial life. It's that food web life going to work on that pile. Now, monitoring your moisture levels and continually turning. The problem becomes if it's ignored for too long or if it's in too much sunlight, those temperatures can skyrocket. And that brings in a completely different form of the food web. And when we start reaching temperatures over 160, 170, 75, toxic, other new bacterial life forms start to grow inside that compost pile if it's not turned and it's not cared for and it's not monitored, and it actually becomes toxic and it will hurt your gardens and your flower beds. So you've got to kind of weigh that little bit of a balance, keep your eye on the moisture level and turn it. It takes roughly 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and you're pulling incredible compost off of there.
So you just can't create a pile and then just walk away from it. Basically, that's what you're saying. You have to really pay as much attention to that as your yard.
Yeah, people have actually had fires start from a compost pile. They just built the pile and walked away. Leaves will ignite. If you pile them too high and the sunlight gets to them, they'll actually ignite. Those temperatures will get up there that high. So it's something you got to watch your moisture content to keep the fire from starting. And you've got to monitor, and it's just like once a day. You barely go in and you pull a third of the pile off and flip it over and kind of push it back in. It's not a labor intensive thing. If you're laboring at it, it's either too big or you're working too hard.
So the heat is formed naturally in the inner core of the compost pile. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, and that heat is being generated by the symbiotic life cycle. Okay, because it looks like that I guess that's the word I'm looking for. It's kind of a symbiotic thing that each organism relies on the other as a host, so to speak, to be able to do what it needs to do.
Correct. There are people heating houses and heating hot water tanks using compost materials and wood piles and coiling gigantic copper coils throughout the wood pile and letting it naturally break down. And they're heating their homes in the middle of winter this way. It's an off-grid solution.
Yeah, I've never heard of that before. That's amazing.
Yes. It's an off-grid solution to heating your home.
I dare say it's a lost art, for most people.
Well, and it's interesting you bring that up, though, because as a lost art, because there is so much that I think that our forefathers knew back at the turn of the last century, and certainly, of course, the century before that, that is just lost on us today. Okay, I mean, obviously, back at the turn of the 1900s and the 1800s, they didn't have all of the stuff that they have today, but they made it work. They figured it out and they made it work, and they were able to do it. And I guess what I don't understand is how, when you have something successful, you've heard of the old saying, if it's not broke, don't fix it. Okay. And I'm sitting here thinking to myself that, okay, if farmers have been doing this for centuries with crop rotations, why would companies want to come in and figure out that, well, that's not good enough anymore and come in with this fake food?
Cheaper, faster production.
So they're looking at volume. They're just purely looking at volume.
Right. They don't, it's not about the nutritional value. It's how fast can I get it to market? And if I can use
in the long run, it's not cheaper.
Well, no, not to us. Not to our health. Definitely not to the soil or the planet. Everybody's looking for the no, you're fine. You're fine. It's not healthier for us in any way, shape, or form. It's not good for the planet. It's deteriorating everything. So that's the answer.
Right.
They're looking for the faster buck.
Right, to turn a quick dollar and a quick profit. Let me ask this question. So if a person wants to go ahead and start the road to repairing their yard, okay? I know there's a lot of excellent tips that are in your book. And how long would it take the average person that has no green thumb whatsoever to be able to transform their yard? Is this something that's done over one summer? Does it take 2 or 3 summers? About how long are we looking at before we begin to actually see these blue ribbon type vegetables and grass come in?
Well, day one, when you finally become convinced that the chemicals that you have stored in your garage to start applying to your yard are the problem, and you throw them away, you're going to start seeing a difference. I know that sounds kind of spooky and it sounds kind of weird, but when you go out there and you wash your yard the first time, yeah, and I literally said that, go wash your yard, because you got to remember chemtrails. You've got to remember car exhaust, factory exhaust, people exhaling on a daily basis, the winter dreary, and everything that was stuck in the snow, the salt, the oils, the whatevers, this, just everything, all the pollution, flat out. When you go out and wash your yard and you get the surfactant level to kick up on your grass blades, which means their ability to absorb water and absorb moisture, your yard literally will start greening up that day, because it's able to absorb water instantaneously.
Now, when you
start adding a few tricks and a few of the, let's go with molasses for one of them. And I don't hardcore preach molasses every single time. This is just a trick. This is just a, pop this out there every once in a while. But when you take a little bit of those sugars and you spray them down in your yard, and not only does your yard smell incredible and your neighbors come out going, wow, that's awesome, what was that? You're actually helping that microbial life. That microbial life is there to exchange the sugars with your grass and your grass roots. And the microbial life thrives on the sugars and starts to expand themselves. So you actually trigger a reaction at the same time that you're doing this. So when you go out and you wash your yard, and you turn around the next day and water your yard with a little bit of sugar, a little bit of deer grade molasses, you're helping Mother Nature, and everything starts to change, and it's instantaneous. And as you take these steps to walk through this process,
go ahead, finish, Ron, because I have a question.
No, go right ahead, because I was going to lead a whole nother speech into the garden. Go right ahead. Okay.
Well, no, I was just gonna clarify. It's not just any sugar; it's certain types of sugar, right?
Right. And you don't want a type of soil, nor do you want a type of microbial life that is dependent on you for sugar either. So you've got to let Mother Nature come in and help. You've got to only do this on a limited basis. If anything, I would say, if you're going to do your yard once or twice a year, depending on how starving and how hurting it looks like it is. If you're trying to help reclaim the soils and reclaim the clay conditions, then you might want to do it a third time. Otherwise, once a year, maybe twice, depending on what's going on in your yard. So and you'll learn that as you go.
So let me ask this question. When you've mentioned this term, wash your yard.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm assuming that you're not talking about, getting soap and shampoo out and stuff like that. What do you mean by
just soap? Just soap.
Oh, really? Really?
I want you to go get yourself a bottle of lemon-scented dish soap and a garden hose end sprayer that foams up like crazy. And I want you to go out with the neighborhood kids, and I want you to have a big bubble bath party in your yard. Wash your yard.
Wow.
Give it a bubble bath.
And it doesn't affect the
No, this is what they're
Okay.
using to clean the oil slicks off all of the wild animals that get in the oil slicks. Dawn is safe. I have a zoo at home. I've got 3 dogs and 4 cats, and they're all out there all the time. I'm out there all the time barefoot. I don't worry about anything. It's all natural.
So
and the interesting thing about your Dawn lemon scent, yeah, dish soap.
Oh, okay, dish soap. Okay.
Yeah. You want to wash your driveway down and get rid of some of those oil stains from the winter? Use Dawn dish soap. Don't go get an acid. Don't go get something that's toxic. You've got to have gloves on and this and that. If you have to go that far overboard to protect yourself, do you really want contact with your yard, your lungs, the food web, and anything else you're coming in contact with? Run from it.
Yeah.
Don't do it. Just Dawn soap, scrub brush, get the neighborhood kids, have a water balloon battle, have fun. That's what nature's all about. The fun thing about lemon is there are a lot of these little interesting pests that run around, ants. Now, they do serve a purpose, but you really don't want them in your house. If you spray your house and the edges of your house down with lemon-scented Dawn and your flower beds and what have you, you'll drive them away naturally. They hate citrus. So not only are you washing your house, you're hosing your yard down with bubbles, you're having a great time with the kids, you're helping nature get clean from all of the toxins that are dumped on her on a daily basis.
So, okay, so wash your yard and then water your yard. Okay.
Yeah.
And then now let me ask you this, because you mentioned something about that you have some dogs and cats, and we know that there are natural functions that they perform when they go out in the yard in the morning and in the evening and stuff like that. Does the acid from the urine affect any part of this?
Nope. Has no effect. Has no effect. Once nature is working the way it's supposed to, nothing. It has no ill effect on the yard whatsoever. No yellow stains, no burn marks, no nothing. Now, obviously, that's contingent to their diet. You can be giving your animals really bad toxic things that their body is spitting out that's going to burn your grass. That's when you need to be looking at your dog's diet. Because it's not safe. Something's wrong. But how many times do you remember roaming around in nature, seeing where, wolves had marked a tree and it burnt the tree or burnt the grass? It doesn't. It just leaves a smell.
They don't.
I've seen that. Yeah.
So that's the comparative. If you've got a dog out there leaving yellow marks in your yard, cats out there leaving marks and burning the soils and what have you, there's a different issue with their diet that needs to be addressed. And again, it'll go back to a dietary, just like our problems and our health problems. We're all the same creatures. We all live on the same way on the food web. We're all just part of the food chain. When there's something wrong, whether it be your eyesight, your hair, your joints, arthritis, all of it, it's all dietary. It all goes back to the vitamin intake and the mineral intake. We all need certain things. And we've disrupted that by harming the food web and stopping the ability of a lot of these plants to take those minerals in anymore.
We have to think about how how they did it 100 years ago. And, that's really not that long ago.
Right. But it was less is more. We used to have wood burning fireplaces. We take all of those ashes from all of those trees and all of the remaining minerals from those ashes, and we'd stick them back in our gardens, and the gardens would thrive. Well, isn't that interesting that they've mandated that we no longer have wood burning fireplaces any longer? They've taken that away from us.
And I've seen that.
Some places like California, they kind of outlawed that.
I think even places in Colorado.
Conspiracy, if that's what you want to call it.
Yeah, some places in Colorado now are saying that unless you have an older home, that, hasn't been fitted for, gas or electric heat or whatever, then you'd be allowed to use a fireplace, but newer homes aren't gonna be able to have it.
Right, and you're not going to be able to get the permit from the government to say you're allowed to do this and live the old way, the natural way.
And that's a sad thing, because we are seeing our whole heritage just evaporate in front of our eyes. With more and more regulation and everything like that. I have seen municipalities come out, and they have come out with stuff to where they don't even want you to collect rainwater.
Yep.
That's Oregon.
That they're saying it's against the law to try to collect rainwater. And I'm sitting here thinking, I'm sitting here thinking to myself, now wait a minute. You can't say that the government owns the clouds, okay? I mean, this is ridiculous, okay?
I would do it, not tell anybody.
It's out of control. And the only people that are going to be able to change it are those of us paying attention.
Because how are people going to know you're collecting rainwater unless you tell somebody?
Right. You're right. And there's a lot of people that do it on the side. My city is one of those cities that wants to be aware of that. They want to be watching it, and they say their reason for that is mosquitoes. I'm sorry, but I can put a drop of silver in the water, and I am not going to have mosquitoes, because it's natural antibacterial and it's going to kill off the mosquitoes. I can put a mosquito net over it. But their statement is that rain bucket must be empty at least a week after the last rain. You have to drain it off at that rate, or you cannot collect your own rainwater. Go figure.
Well,
how
are they going to keep track of that?
Right. I don't need to. My soil collects so much water as it is, because I don't have the clay bed. If I take a rototiller out in my front yard, God forbid, I don't even know why I would, but if I were to do that today and turn that thing on, I would need my 4x4 truck to pull the thing back out of the yard, because it would go so deep so fast, because there's no clay under there. It's just topsoil, straight down, just like Mother Nature's way. There's a research that was done over in Arizona where they took a large piece of glass, plexiglass, what have you, 24 feet long, I understood, and they shoved it down into the soil, and it sunk in an untouched 50-year-old property. And when they pulled the dirt away and they washed that all away and they looked at the roots, every one of those plants up against that glass had roots going down at least 13 feet, 14 feet. That's Mother Nature's way. That's what your yard is supposed to be doing.
And again, your book will tell you how to convert the clay back into soil.
Yes. I mean, if you're struggling with some issues, say you've got some low spots in your yard to collect water, and you can ignore that for a little while, go out there with some radishes and plant them. Radishes have this really, really unique way of, not only do they amp up the nitrogen in your soil, but their roots are so strong, they will drive right through that clay and put organic matter back down there and get that clay to open up and start receiving water and sunlight again.
Now you're talking about the root to the radishes themselves.
Yeah, the root, the radish, the whole deal. I plant it and forget it. I wouldn't even pull it. I wouldn't cut it. I wouldn't do anything. And it will naturally break that clay bed up 3, 4, 5 feet down into that clay bed and open that up. And then when it rains, you're not talking about that area flooding anymore. You're talking about that area drinking that water up and putting it to use. That's Mother Nature's way.
So a radish is hard to grow?
No, very easy to grow. And they'll grow through clay.
And that's not, and I'll tell you something, that's not easy, because clay, I remember as a kid, I used to go down to the local creek with my friends and stuff, and right by the water banks and stuff like that, a lot of the dirt would be very clay-like, okay, and everything, and you would see a lot of worms in there sometimes. We would be digging stuff up or whatever. But I always just thought that the only thing that this clay was good for was like to just make shapes out of, mold them into to things or whatever. Because I couldn't ever imagine that you would grow something in it, or that anything could grow in it for that matter. In fact, you know what? Come to think of it now, when I look at it, it's like what you just said. There would be a thin layer of grass at the top and some dirt, and you didn't have to go far before you started hitting soil that, honest to goodness, you needed to take a shovel and a mallet to be able to dig a hole in it. It was almost like dealing with cement almost.
In a sense,
it was that hard.
And what basically what clay is, and you're looking at the end result of all of this. Clay is topsoil, or at least it used to be. Once it loses its organic matter, once the food web starts to deteriorate from it and get compressed out of it, and gravity takes effect, water doesn't get in, sunlight doesn't get in, no living organic matter survives in it. It just becomes this compacted, compressed mess that nothing can live in. In essence, there are certain plants, again, going back to Mother Nature, weeds. There are certain plants out there that are directly attacking clay to try and turn it back into soil and put organic matter and organic life and get these conditions reversed and turned around. And we're attacking the weeds. So we're inevitably causing this problem. So where we used to have a yard that had 3 feet of topsoil, another foot of soil as it was losing its organic matter and nothing else was being replenished and put back into it. And then we had a little bit of clay, and then we were getting down to sand and rock. That's the way it used to be. But because we have been just feeding everything on the top and not worrying about anything else and just doing the NPK process, we've allowed no organic matter to survive in our yards. And that clay bed and that compaction is growing and growing exponentially. And now a half an inch of water causes flooding throughout most cities. Major flooding.
So
Flash flooding.
just for our listening audience, what does NPK stand for?
It's your nitrogen potassium levels, measurements that somebody came up with and said these are important for your plants one day. Yeah, how interesting. They're all derivatives of oil.
Really?
What does oil have to do with anything?
Well, what do you think your fertilizers are coming from your big box stores? Those are all chemicals derived from oil. Yeah. Huh.
I know a lot of things are made from petroleum, but fertilizer?
Yeah. Your fertilizer, your weed killers, your pest control, all oil derivatives, all coming from big banks, big oil, all coming from your chemical companies. Go into any one of your big box stores, and it's not their fault that a lot of these things aren't available. Some of them are becoming available. To their credit, the big box stores are starting to see it. They're starting to see the trend, and they're starting to look the other direction. But go in there and just walk down any one of those aisles where there's fertilizer and start reading the bags. And if you start seeing numbers instead of words you can pronounce, it's a chemical from an oil company. It's not something you want to be putting in your yard, because that's what caused these problems.
Good to make a note of.
Yesterday.
Always read the label.
Right. My process in your garden, if you were to put this process to work, and in the very end of the book, I went into Ray's yard, a dear friend of mine that had passed away. It had been 3 years and nothing had grown in his gardens. No one had touched it. It was just like an homage to Ray. And I went in there with the permission of his family And I put my process into that one bed, and I turned that bed around. And in 90 days, the production coming out of his yard matched mine. It happens that fast. Where
Kinda
I
like
went
a
in
person.
and I broke this. I'm sorry?
I was just going to say, it's kind of like a person who doesn't eat vegetables, and then they eat their vegetables and their body goes, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Yes.
Same thing with your yard. When you feed your yard or garden what it needs, it says thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Now, let me ask you this question. Let's say you have a yard where you've got a lot of brown patches because the grass isn't growing for whatever reason, but you do have some spots where there is some grass that's growing. And I know there's lots of different types of grass that's out there. And I've seen like these landscaping companies that'll come in and they'll lay sod on someone's yard. They'll rototill it and then lay sod on there, and then tell them, well, keep watering this thing, and let the sod connect with whatever the dirt is that we just broke up or whatever. And I've seen some of this sod work, sort of. And I've seen some of it just become an epic fail, okay, to where, the kids are out there playing in the yard in the back, and all of a sudden one of the squares comes flapping right up, okay, and what's going on there, or what's not going on there when people do that?
They went in and they rototilled the soil. They didn't rototill topsoil. They rototilled soil. This brown, almost powder substance, hard powder substance, just soil, not topsoil. Mm-hmm. There's some organic matter there, but there's no organic life there. That organic life cannot bond with the sod that you're bringing in. I would tell any new homeowner, absolutely do not pay for the sod. Clean your yard up, clean up everything that they have buried and left behind, because they're just builders. They're going to fill a hole with whatever they can find, 2x4s or what have you. That hole's still going to come back. Clean your yard up and plant your yard. Get alfalfa. Get your grass seed, because you're going to have different types of grass seed throughout your yard depending on where the sunlight is, where your potential high points are, where your low points are. You're not going to have one solid piece of grass throughout your entire yard, because the sun cannot shine all the way around your house. We're not living on the equator. You can't have one solid piece of grass. We're going to have different types of pieces of grass growing throughout the yard. So spread your seed out. They used to, a long time ago, they used to give you grass seed that had clover mixed in it, to help with the nitrogen instantaneously being delivered to the soil, so that the grass seed could germinate that much faster and grow that much faster. You don't see that anymore. They don't do that anymore, because they would rather put a chemical in that forces it to be a depleted grass that's dependent on a chemical. All that clover's gone from the mix.
Well, let me ask you this, okay? Like in the instance where, you have a yard where you've got patches, okay, where you've got some grass, but then you've got bare spots all over the place. And in some areas you have some of this stuff, I guess it's called crabgrass. I don't even know if it's a weed or real grass.
It's another weed type of grass, yeah.
Okay. So you want to get regular grass to start growing. So can you
break your soil up? Get some organic matter mixed into that soil. Whether you're going to use peat or you're going to come in with granulated alfalfa or any number of different things. You can even go in there with compost and mix it with that area of soil. You've got to get the organic matter started back in that section. Mm-hmm. Without the food web going, it's not going to adhere. It's like a glue. That's kind of the way to look at what the food web really is. It's like this glue that even though the soil is expanding, it's stuck together and it won't let go of itself. And the roots expand right along with the trail that the food web is chasing, and your roots go deeper. And so you hit this low spot or you hit this brown spot in your yard, and you really go look at that. There's no organic life there. You check it out, you dig a little bit, and you're not going to find any worms. You mix that with some organic matter, some materials that are alive, and then you put your grass seed in there, you're giving that a fighting chance to really come back better than the rest of your yard. But it's the lack of organic matter in those spots that are causing the problems.
So let me ask you this. So if you were to tend to your yard using the methods that you've mentioned in your book, okay, because let's say a person, like I said, they do have patches of grass here and there. Is it possible that there is grass even in the brown spots, but for whatever reason it's just dormant, it's not growing, and that somehow you can, through these methods, almost kickstart it to begin to grow all of a sudden without necessarily having to put more grass seed down?
Yeah, because you're looking at a potential that you may have a disease in that area. If you follow my process, some of the minerals that we use are counter to those diseases. Just like the human body, when you have all the right minerals and stuff in our bodies, you cannot get cancer. When all the conditions are correct in your soil, those conditions can no longer stay that way, and the grass seed and the grass that may potentially still be thriving there can return and return in spades. So yes, this process can reverse 90% of those conditions, easily 90% of those conditions. I can't help if your neighbor comes over and dumps gas in your yard, though, so that may cause a brown spot you can't stop, or your lawnmower may have broke, or yeah, well, you know, gasoline. It's
right. Well, if the neighbor
may have ran out of gas.
That's pretty rude.
Well, right, but I mean, you could have been out there cutting your grass and ran out of gas, and you had to go get more, and you take the gas cap off and you dump it in there, and a little bit of gas sprays out and gets on the lawnmower and then gets on the grass and causes a burn spot. Well, my process can't help that. You just killed that area. That's what oil does. So why are we using it as a fertilizer? Why are we using it as a pesticide?
I never knew that was. Now that I know what to look for, it's just like any food that when you go to the store, you read the labels to make sure that you're getting, you're not getting something weird in your food. You read the labels to make sure you get the right thing. Same thing, I guess, for the, like you said, the food web, you have to read the labels.
Right. There's so much we can do, but by letting nature run its course, by helping nature along, helping with the food web. I've got a couple of survivalist friends that are looking at some of their properties and wanting to work things up, and they're asking me about the process, and it's like, the gray men out there and the survivalists wanting to protect their areas and not be noticed and not be seen. These are processes that can be put into place now and bankrolled for years to come. So that were that situation to happen and they needed to retreat to those areas would be thriving tenfold over what Mother Nature's already doing. And you wouldn't even be noticed because they don't come in like a chemical spray and spray an area and wipe it out to try and bring it back. You're just enhancing what's already there and giving the food web a chance to utilize it.
Well, and we do have, a lot of people that listen that are preppers or survivalists, and they would definitely be interested in enhancing, especially off grid, because your tips, your knowledge in this book The Green Wizard's Guide, that can be found at Amazon or Barnes and Noble, by the way, is really good and very, like I said early on, and for those just now joining and listening, can be informative while entertaining at the same time. It's an easy read. I found it very easy and very, it's like, yeah, there were a couple of times due to things happening in my environment around me, but I had to put the book down, but it's not because I wanted to, and then I'd go pick it back up and then I'd finish it, I'd continue reading. It's an easy read. It's something that you would want to pick back up again. But yes, it gives you tips on how you can start now and making your lawn or garden better now. And so if you have a question for Ron, just press, you can either ask in the chat room and I will relay that to him, or you can press 1 on your dial pad and that will let me know that you have a question or a comment that you would like to participate in. So Ron is here to answer any of those questions. Go ahead, Ron.
See, that's the interesting thing about my book. When it finally finished, and I sat down with some of my target audience, it almost became a competition. I have a great friend over in England who rifled through the book in an hour and was extremely entertained. She's the fastest one that's read it yet, and she couldn't put it down. I have a 66-year-old friend who just had a birthday, who sat down and read the book, and who never reads and can't stand technical manuals, that just absolutely loved the book and rifled through it in an hour and a half. I have another survivalist friend that picked up the book. He got it in the morning. By the evening, when he reported it to me, he had read it 3 times. He enjoyed it that much. It's that kind of book. It's not chapters. It's just an entertaining story full of details. And I made sure.
And it is the type of book, right? And it is the type of book that you would go back to. You would prefer it. It's not only a handbook; it's a reference guide, that you would go back to, and and it isn't, scientific, technical. It's common sense, basic, need to know what you can do now, and it's you really have to read it to get the gist of it. But and I'm not one that has always read gardening books myself, but this one was very, like I said to you, Ron, this is one that was very entertaining and informative. So it helps you retain the information.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like the idiot box commercials. They make them entertaining so that you remember them. And it kind of struck a key with me. And it was like, well, why am I not doing that? Why am I beating somebody up with these details and making it, a drudgery read when this was actually entertaining and a lot of funny stuff happened? So why don't I just relay all of that in this story? Because it's a book, but it's a story. It's just an entertaining guide as to what I did wrong and what I did right.
Yeah. And
how did you feel about the book after you finished it, Rudy?
Well, I'm going to be honest with you. When I read through it, at first, I was looking at it and I was thinking to myself, I don't know if this stuff could work or whatever like that. I mean, I'll be honest with you, I kind of thought that initially until I actually started getting into it. And the thing that struck me was how you were able to build upon each principle. And that was the thing that, to all of the folks that are listening to this program tonight, I cannot, after I finished it, I could say honestly, with all honesty, I could not recommend a better book than this one. Okay. It gives you exactly what you need. It gets right to the point with what you can do, just using the stuff that you can get at your local store. Okay. You don't have to spend a king's ransom to go out and get this stuff. And with a little bit of patience, you can actually begin to see, like I said, the quote unquote blue ribbon type, yard that you would like to have. In a relatively short period of time. So I appreciate the simplicity of how you wrote the book. It was very witty, and it was very uplifting, to be quite honest with you. It's not a hard read in any stretch of the imagination. It's a very fast read, actually. And you can, and it's laid out in such a way where you can literally use it as a reference book, okay? You can pick it up and just use it as a reference book, and to be able to go back to a specific portion and reread it, several times within a very short period of time, and actually grab a hold of the principles in there, because I like the way that you created a journey, all right? And that's how I would describe when I was reading your book, is that it was like a journey. You were taking us through the death of your yard and then the rebirth of it, okay? And everything that took place in between to get from point A to point B, and you drew the reader in and made them part of the ride. You literally brought the reader in and say, hey, this is going to be a fun ride. Let's bring you in, and you can be a passenger on this bus for this ride. And that was kind of the way I felt reading through this, okay? And you allowed us to be able to pull back the curtain to see what the mystery was behind the curtain, that was the mystique of having that great yard, and wondering, well, okay, did this person, do they have some kind of landscaping company coming out here that we don't know about, or what is this? How are you doing this? So I thought it was an excellent book. And like I said, for any folks that are out there that are looking to revitalize your yard, your garden, your flower bed, your flora and fauna, so to speak, or just you're wanting to start a vegetable garden, this is it. This is required reading. This is definitely needs to be on your bookshelf with all of the other stuff that you got for gardening. This needs to be right there, okay? Because you may get actually more out of this than you would all the rest of the stuff anyways.
Well, thank you. Yeah, and can you dispel something real quick, because I know I'm getting some feedback from some of my other friends. The word wizard, as in the Green Wizard's Guide, in any way, shape, or form, did you feel like you were being thrown into Hogwarts and being taught incantations and something evil and twisted and
No.
Really on the dark side of, oh boy, this could be anti-church and anti-everything?
No,
and at any point.
No, I want to dispel that myth right there. It has nothing to do with any dark occultic thing. It's not satanic. It's not any of that. It just makes it entertaining. When you grow somebody says they have a green thumb. Well, it's kind of like, you're a green wizard. It doesn't mean you're the Wizard of Oz, but you are kind of just like a master gardener, And this book, by the way, isn't just for beginners. It's also for professionals, because you'll learn something that you probably hadn't known that you could do. Okay, so it's good for everybody.
That's interesting. I've actually had a few landscaper friends of mine come back to me after reading the book and go, that was awesome, because some of those things I had actually forgotten, and you just reminded me of them, and I should have been using them last year. And that's the key here. It's things we have forgotten, things we just, it's like a book you would pick up once a year and go, I'm going to blow through this book again just to have some fun and laugh at this guy, because Ray really put it to him and really gave him a good ribbon, and it was funny. And just remind yourself of, okay, this is the process, and we're done.
Well, and the thing is, as far as
everything thrives.
As far as the title, The Green Wizard, I looked at it just pretty much as a metaphor that, hey, it almost looks like magic, the way you've transformed your yard from nothing to something spectacular. Okay, but when you read the book, you see that there's no black magic here or anything like that. It's like referring to someone as a speed demon who likes to drive fast. Well, we know they're not possessed or whatever. It's just kind of a metaphor, so to speak.
Right.
And that's the way that I looked at it. It was just strictly as a metaphor to achieving something that seems almost unachievable. Okay. And just, and having people wonder, like, wow, how did you do that? And you can kind of look at them and, give them a wink with your eye and say, it's magic.
Yeah. Well, I did that the first couple of years, until Ray had passed. It was, I kind of had ideas of writing the book, but I was kind of having more fun just leading the pack and having the best tomatoes and having the best yard. And after he was gone, it was like, okay, I need to write this stuff down. It's really haunting me. I need to get this out and get this to my neighbors and really start making a change, because honestly, who else is stepping up and saying, look, we have a global condition here. We need to fix it. And here's a way to do it.
Exactly.
The government wants to charge us for the problem, but they're not giving us a solution.
Right. If this stuff wasn't written down, this would be knowledge that would ultimately be lost and for all practical purposes, it has been lost, but you've revitalized it. You have brought it back to the surface, and so it's not really lost. You've got it in written form, And by the way, this book not only comes in a soft cover manual, but it comes in an ebook too. And I was lucky enough to get both. So, and I love it. So, but you can get them in both, and both are very helpful. So, just so you know, this is knowledge that you would go back to time and time again. It's a timeless toolbox for your yard and garden.
Well, and I think also that not just to that extent, but you know what? I know a lot of people over the years, especially when I was growing up as a kid, you would have people that would take a shot at growing some tomato plants or growing a little bit of this or a little bit of that in their backyard. And the thing was that, okay, you might have a dozen plants back there, and they may give you, maybe 30 or 40 tomatoes or 50 tomatoes at the tops or whatever. And that was kind of it. Okay. And then, that was the end of the plants. And because of the soil it was planted in, you didn't have too much expectation as to which ones were going to survive or whatever. But I suspect that using the methods that you've put forth in your book, because you mentioned some numbers there that were almost unbelievable as far as the amount of tomatoes and other vegetables you were able to produce using this, is that you can have a garden that literally will give a brand new definition to the term bumper crop.
Yes.
Okay.
And no crop rotation required ever.
Yeah, and
this stops crop rotation. It's no longer required. That's another one of the big keys that a lot of the homesteaders are unaware of. They're hearing this and they're saying, as they're exploring their avenues. This book is brand new, people. This just came out in February. They've not had a chance to get their hands on this book. And they're going by what the farmers are all telling them. You must crop rotate. You have to keep moving this to here, this to there, this to there every 2 to 3 years, because you're pulling everything out of the soil and you're not putting things back. You have to do crop rotation. With my process, you don't. With my process, you plant the same plants in the same place every year and get the same, if not better, results every year, year after year.
Because you're putting the minerals back into the soil.
Right. And we're allowing the food web to relax and do what it does best. And that's expand and bring everything back. Even if the stuff that I'm putting back in the soil isn't a contributing factor, the food web is thriving all winter long and going out and bringing this stuff back so that when the new plants go in, it's already there and available. The food web joins right with the plants and it just takes off. It's like I'm putting it on a steroid because it comes out of the ground that hard, that fast. You have to get out of the way. Ray's garden, exactly the same dimensions as mine, less exactly 40 feet away, struggled with him watering every single day. And I did nothing. And I still produced more with exactly the same amount of plants. I had to actually reduce how many plants I was putting in the ground because I was getting so many and so many more year after year. Ray just finally gave up and said, I'm not planting tomatoes anymore. I'm just coming to get yours.
Well, that sounds like a good problem to have, but you know what?
Yeah.
But this is how you're able to supplement your own food pantry. Okay. Allow nature to give you the things that you don't need to necessarily buy. I know that in the past, I've had a lot of people say that the best thing to do is to buy your fruits and vegetables from a farmer's market, and I suppose that probably there is some benefit to doing that versus buying the stuff that's coming into your grocery store.
Oh, absolutely.
And I'm sure that if you live anywhere near a rural area where there's a lot of farmland, that you're able to buy your stuff from a farmer's market. And I see them all the time here. I'm out on the East Coast, and I see the little shops that are farmers markets where they'll have a sign that says no GMOs, all grown naturally and stuff like that with no chemicals or whatever. But I don't know if they use any of the formulas that you have. Okay, and they probably they probably don't. I know that they probably have to crop rotate in order to get what they do have. Okay, otherwise their food's going to be no different than what the major chain supermarkets are bringing in.
They'll still be more healthy for you.
Right.
Because they're not being chemically doused, and they're not a chemically dependent plant, so they're going to be better. But if you put mine on a plate next to one of theirs and have a blind taste test, mine wins.
There you go.
Yeah, exactly.
Flavor.
Hey, gentlemen, I need to take a break.
Size. Yes, absolutely.
And I'm sorry, I need to interrupt, but I need to take this break, and I'll be right back in a few moments.
Go right ahead.
Come on.
Are you looking for a new place to shop, eat, and save? Are you sick of paying full price? Would you like to save money at the places you enjoy most?
Ugh. Hey, old man, what's going on, buddy? Welcome. Just pausing long enough to get through these. I think it's like 4 or 5 minutes of commercials on this other show. I did a blog interview for the book, and I'm just doing the rebroadcast, so I've got a record of it on YouTube. They rebroadcast it last night. I was unable to catch it. So how you doing today, buddy?
Who knew? And there are a few places that we are going to check out. View the books in your area before you buy. Go to freedomizerradio.com or barefootislegal.org. Just click on your city, and within a few days, you will be saving money around town with your new Dave Around book.
No, that's the way to put it.
Hey guys, Sam here, host of Against the Grain radio show, where every week we feature a guest speaker whose knowledge, careers, or entire lives are based outside of societal engineered norms. Listen in to hear their knowledge and experiences. Plus, have a chance to ask questions, discuss, and make connections with these incredible individuals. We're bringing the village back.
Yes.
Every Wednesday evening at 4:30 Pacific time and 6:30 Eastern time on freedomriderradio.com.
Oh, appreciate that, old man. Well, just every once in a while, somebody will offer to do a giveaway. And I announce those on this channel. So you never know. You may catch a free book in one of the contests. Anything's possible. Yes, Miss Mary, my twinkling star. What's your question, dear?
Counterculture-wise.
Max, it's not your show.
Not your guest, Max. You're the host. They want to rein it in a little bit. Very well. Tune in for Counterculture-wise every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on freedomizerradio.com.
You know,
It should be called Counterculture Max.
Counterculture why?
oh, liquid intake. Yep. Liquid intake.
Got a spare tire around that waist? Is your muffin top binge uncontrollably? We are the government and we are here to help you. Here at our free Feel Weight Loss Camp, we have numerous ways to help you shed those unsightly, unwanted pounds.
Yeah.
Or fatties eating mitigated
Automatically
has a communist style weight
greatly
loss
increase.
that specializes in centralized weight loss planning and communal extended fasting programs to shed that fat away in no time. Skin and bone, extra toned is the motto. Just remember, there's no way you can do it on your own. We will forcefully assist you into compliance.
Increase what?
Failure is not an option in this utopian wonderland.
What's the right words?
Typical workout regimes include digging ditches, stocking down.
Oh, yes, dear. It is a cup of coffee minus the hot tub. I was asked to write an article for a blog, which is why I've got this thing going at the same time. Yes, dear. Returning to the show, I think.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to the Delusion Solution Live Radio Show with our guest, Ron Neitzel. If you're just now joining us, our calling number is 319-527-6208, or you could join us on freedomizerradio.com, listen live button, and join in the chat. And I want to welcome all of our guests who are listening in and just enjoying the show. We do have several. So welcome back, Ron and Rudy. Rudy's my co-host, and Ron is our guest. So Ron wrote the book, The Green Wizard's Guide. It's a guide to help you with your garden or grass. And it's so entertaining and informative. It's something that you would go back to again and again. So, Ron, I have a question. In my yard, I have found some poison sumac growing. Does that mean that the yard is sick?
No. That is just another one of Mother Nature's little tricks, doing her little thing. Because for every good, there is also a bad. And yeah, removing the sumac and getting it away from us, that's kind of Mother Nature's way of saying you really probably shouldn't be around these trees because I'd really like you to leave me alone. Is kind of the way to look at some of the poison ivies and the poison sumac and what have you.
Yeah.
There are solutions, and one of them is in my book, as to how to safely deal with that and ask it to go away. And that's just a little bit of apple cider vinegar and some salt mixed with some water in a spray bottle, and go back there and mist those areas down. Get it on the bigger leaf of your poison ivy in your sumac vine. Slice that open a little bit and get some of that in there, and it'll go away.
Good. Will it kill it?
Yeah, it'll go away.
Yeah, I know that I have struggled with poison ivy, and
Oh, I'm done.
it's like,
Do it. So I know.
yeah, you know, you think that you've gotten rid of it, and then lo and behold, there it is again. Okay, and it's like,
Yeah.
you know, what the heck? I thought I got rid of you last year, and here you are coming up the same spot. And
Well, once you start changing the soil conditions, again, different weeds and their seeds only germinate under certain soil conditions. So the soil conditions at that area are conducive to that continually growing. So until you change the soil conditions, you can expect it to continue to return. You're going to kill it off for the year, but the conditions have not changed. And that's where people make the mistake a lot of times when they go out and they wipe out a field of this, that, or the other, is they never actually address the soil conditions that Mother Nature is trying to repair or trying to fix or trying to change. You could have a heavy acidic area where the poison sumac is trying to pull all of those acids up out of the soil and help the tree life in that area. And by you hurting that and not solving those conditions in the soil, you could actually be hurting other trees. That's what I mean when I say listen to Mother Nature and learn how to read her. That's one of those factors. My system is a broad spectrum system. It addresses all of them on a blanket form. You cannot over toxify with any of this. Walk in it barefoot. The animals can eat it. It is completely safe. The people who found a lot of these minerals actually use them in their foods and in their diet on a daily basis and eat and digest these minerals. And they're in their 90s.
oh
and
wow,
living alone and doing well. Very, very well.
so it's not just enough to pluck up weeds by the root, because
No.
I've done this before where I don't know, I've got an interesting patchwork of quilt design here of different weeds and stuff, and I go in there and I'm like, you know, I'll have a weeder in my hand and I'm trying to pluck this stuff up, and I'm thinking, oh, okay, well, I got you. And then next year,
you're working too hard.
yeah, next year I got the same freaking type of weed growing up almost in the exact same spot that I supposedly got rid of it from last year. And, you know, and it's very frustrating, but it's encouraging to know that what you're saying is that basically you heal your soil. What you're saying is you heal your soil, and the soil itself will take care of the weeds.
Yes. The conditions will no longer be conducive to those weeds being there. Everything will balance itself back out again, and the weeds will go away. You're
Is
just
this
helping Mother
something
Nature.
that they knew about 100 years ago?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I guess the retail establishment for agriculture has made people believe that they need all these chemicals in order to sustain a healthy ground.
Right. They've got you from table to table. Whether it's the dinner table or the operating table, they've got you.
Oh gosh,
everybody fell for it.
That's a grisly way of looking at it, but I suppose that there's a certain level of truth in that statement. They really do. Because you know, it's like the old saying, garbage in, garbage out. And you know, and you're doing that. So let me ask you this now. So a person goes through all of this, they wash their yard, they water it, as we mentioned in the last hour, and they begin applying these principles. Okay. So initially the first year, somebody reading your book and deciding, okay, I'm going to use this like a checklist. Check, 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 check. Will they
be ready to cut your grass longer into the year?
I'm sorry, what?
Be ready to cut your grass longer into the year.
Okay,
I was cutting grass after the first snowfall because it was still growing.
Okay,
Yes.
so
it works that well.
So basically, they're going to see pretty much results that first year. Once they begin doing this, the soil begins to just literally, as you're saying in your book, it literally begins to transform itself, and naturally all the vegetation begins to transform itself, and you start to see this the very first year.
Yeah. Oh yeah. The color difference to your neighbors alone is the first indication that it's beginning to work. And as you apply these principles and the food web comes in and really, really starts to make the change, you see it in spades because you can't keep up with your grass. I mean, we just had a snowstorm Sunday here in Cleveland, and I'm looking at my neighbors' yards and they're starting to green. Mine's growing. I need to cut it already.
Oh my gosh, and it's the first week of April and you're already having to cut it. Wow.
Yes. It's already there. And see, that's what's really interesting about my process. And it seems like it's not possible as you read through this, but legitimately, I had no time last year as I was getting this book together to get it out to everybody this year. I had no time to apply the principle. Last year was Mother Nature's year all by herself. My grass was being cut sooner, 5 weeks sooner than everybody else, twice a week, all year long, and I was still cutting right up into the first snowstorm. And I did nothing. None of the stuff that I say do, I did, and my yard thrived incredibly well. Now, I'll apply the process again this year because I've skipped a year. But that's the point. You're doing exactly the same process with my system as you would if you were doing the chemicals. Because you're still going to go out there and do your spring weed feed. You're still going to go out there and do your summer feed. You're still going to go out there and do your fall weed and feed. And one less process that you're going to have to deal with, which again, financially speaking, is you're not going to have to go out there and put down your pest control. So here you would be normally doing 4 different processes of expensive chemicals to put down in your yard, or you do 3 of mine and you only have to do it for a couple of years and you can skip a year. And what you would have spent that first year on the chemicals to treat your yard 4 times, you spend less than that on my system, and there's enough there to do it 2 full years.
Now, let me ask you this. As the soil begins to heal, let's talk about something else. Like, for instance, you had mentioned, like you had dogs, and I mentioned, about pets. And I know we talked about, if they urinate, is it going to create spots or whatever? Will this process also get rid of the pests that would normally be, something that would be attracted to your dog, like for instance, fleas or ticks? Okay, because normally, I've seen people, they let their dog out in their backyard, and if, they're having problems with that, then they're bringing these things in the house. Will a healthy lawn and grass actually do something with those types of pests?
A lot of those pests won't come, because again, a lot of these pests are there to attack sick weeds, sick grass, sick this, sick that, and in some cases they're actually coming into after the food web. And there's things and smells and what have you on the microscopic level that these bugs are there to attack. But as you make your yard healthier, these bugs don't come in anymore because the natural defenses are so strong. But that's also why I added a few more tidbits in the book. Throughout the book, I've added little things beyond the food web. As much as I preach the food web, there is more in this book. It's just tidbits of added information. garlic is one of my best friends. And it's not because of the health benefits of it. It's because it's got this very weird kind of effect on the soil. I found it in Ray's yard first, who does not treat his yard or did not treat his yard prior to his passing. He grew garlic, but he didn't have these pests. And he had as many pests as I did. He didn't have anywhere near the pests I had walking in my grass. As soon as I moved the garlic and started it growing in my yard, those pests went away. And I grow garlic everywhere, just so that whatever it is that it does to the soil and radiates around in the soil, it dries off. And I've got a bumper crop of gigantic, huge, softball-sized garlics coming up in my front yard now. And they're just radiating the yard and keeping the pests out of the yard.
Wow.
What about marigolds? My mother used to put marigolds in between her plants because she said that those were like a natural bug repellent.
Right, because they actually have a stronger natural bug defense. So they kind of radiate out to the other plants. So yeah, there's many, many things that, again, and I'm glad you went back there, because there's blank pages in my book where you can add those kind of details, because marigolds are important. They do attract deer, but there are other ways you can send the deer away, and that human hair is one of the best. Go to a men's barber shop and get some undyed hair and put that on your marigolds and put that on your plants. And once the deer get a mouthful of human hair, they don't come back. They don't like that.
That's kind of funny. Eating human hair.
Yeah, well, these are the things. These are the things that were known, that were passed down, that we have forgotten. And I've left blank pages throughout my book so that you can take notes and add those things throughout the book, so that we don't lose all of this information.
So it doesn't. Let's say if you add human hair, that doesn't disrupt the plant.
No, it won't affect it at all. It'll just sit there until it rains off. And then it'll dissolve back into the soil anyhow and go right back where it came from. It's just minerals and whatever you eat too. As long as it's not hair dye. You know, those hair dye colors, right. number, something right. or other that women like. Yeah, chemicals. Oil derivatives, chemicals.
Which isn't good for you, anyways. It gets into your brain.
No. It could.
No, but it does get into your brain. No, it's been shown to get into the brain.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, see, that's a frightening factor. Ladies don't hair dye. There's an issue.
Yeah, that's right.
See, that's an interesting thing too, because a lot of people are under this idea that because they get gray hair, they need to go get hair dye. No. What they need to do is learn and understand and read nature. And I hate to go homeopathic, but it turns out a 3,000-year-old recipe for colloidal copper will reverse gray hair.
I was just
and the gray hair goes away.
Take copper. I was just going to say you need to take copper for your gray hair.
And it's great for joints, great for this, it's great for that. You know, a lot of these things used to be available in our soils and in our foods. Something happened.
But you can make colloidal copper for those who make their own colloidal silver, you can make your colloidal copper as well. Just an FYI.
It's a little bit trickier to do. What I found in the recipe was just a pinch of salt to make the water a little more electrifiable at 12 volts.
Right.
Be very careful and watch your time, because it will become toxic very, very fast, and that copper will break down very, very quickly. But yes, you can make it at home with just a pinch of salt added to the clear water.
That's right.
I had a friend that had bursitis really, really bad. He was out breaking up ice, and he went to 5 or 6 different doctors, and they said, it's just something you're going to have to deal with. It's going to flare up every year. His hands and his joints were swollen. He could barely move them and what have you. And I came home and I did the research and I found this in the Oriental recipes, and I whipped him up some copper and I took it back to him. And a week later, his hands were cured and it was gone.
Yeah, you can apply copper to your skin topically if it's made correctly.
Right. But I gave him the form in colloidal, and it was an instantaneous, miraculous turnaround that even his doctors could not explain, because they're not taught holistic medicines. They're not taught.
Yeah.
They're not taught about your dietary. They get maybe a week.
1 hour.
A week's worth of dietary training? 1 hour?
No, they only 1 hour. They only get 1 hour worth of nutritional training.
And they want to call themselves your doctor, that they're actually out there to protect you.
I mean, they have their place, but they, very few, unless they educate themselves, very few doctors are knowledgeable on holistic medicine. And so it's up to you as an individual.
It's dietary.
You have to educate yourself. And a lot of what Ron lists in his book is of those minerals that the soil needs are what you need for your body as well, that you're not getting. And many times you have to supplement externally because you're not getting them anymore.
Right. And then we go right back to the same issues of, are we getting the right supplements? Are they being absorbed into our body? Is our body capable of absorbing them? Well, that's where I kind of lean back on my gardens and go, this is where we were supposed to get it originally. So why aren't we resupplying it back into our soils, stopping our crop rotations, bringing everything back to its highest possible levels, and letting Mother Nature bring it back into the foods naturally, enhancing the flavors and giving us back everything we actually need and absorbing it correctly the way it was designed? Why do we have to go buy it off a shelf when we can just go out, pick it out of our garden, and get it now?
And that's the way it should be, because like I shared with you before, one of the trace minerals that I have actually taken, I have to take it separately because I started getting arthritis and I started getting it in my fingers, and I had to start putting it in my water, this trace mineral, and it actually made the pain, the arthritis, whatever was causing the pain in my fingers go away.
Yeah, so there's so many different things there.
Yeah, and I'm just saying, if I had been able to get it in the crops that we're supposedly being nourished with, then I wouldn't have had to go that route.
Right.
Well, and the thing is that
had the system.
Yeah, no, I'm saying that the thing is that when you talk to doctors about this, they're quick to kind of look at you like, it's almost like they look at you as like it's, like an old wives' tale or old folklore medicine or whatever. And but there are some doctors
I'm in the white coat. You're supposed to look up to me and don't bring this other stuff to me because I'm not bringing it to you because it's not important.
Right, and
but when you look at their vacation schedule, it's with the check that came from Monsanto.
Right, and I'll be honest with you. You have to really hunt around and look for a good doctor. I know that I have one that I went to, that I still go to actually, and I like his approach. I would not necessarily say that he's a nutritional doctor, but he has a very open mind and he's open to listen to what you have to say. And I remember one year I went to go see him. This was probably about 10, 15 years ago. And I was having some issues going on. And he says, well, you know what? I think that you're deficient in a certain vitamin. So he says, why don't we go ahead and have you take, D3 or whatever it was that we're doing and try that first. Okay. And I looked at him and I was thinking to myself, because I was expecting him to give me a script for something to get from the pharmacy or whatever. But he says, look, if we can approach this from a natural standpoint, let's do that, because I can always write out a prescription for you. Okay. I can always do that. But if we don't have to do that, let's try something first. Okay, let's try this and see if we can get the levels that you need up to through, taking these vitamins or minerals. And if that doesn't work, then fine. We'll go ahead and we'll write a script out for whatever. And I had to honestly say that I was impressed with that, because a lot of doctors, would not even let you think that that was even an option. Okay, they would just be writing out a script and handing it to you. Okay, and say, well, take this and then come back and see me in 6 or 8 weeks, and we'll see how you're doing. But that struck me as being a very responsible approach. Let's try this, and if it doesn't work, then fine, we can go to the prescription. And I don't think you see too many people that are willing to do that today.
No, and it actually shocks me, because a lot of doctors that are starting to come out this way are being disbarred and slowly being put out of business, and their good names are being dragged through the mud in their circles, because they're going the opposite direction, and they're starting to help people, and that's not what big pharma wants.
No, well, and they're wanting to see people dependent on the drugs, and that's what, you still have a lot of doctors. Like when I told one of my doctors that I was taking this trace mineral, he thought I was taking poison. I said, no, I had to prove to him the next time I saw him that this was actually a trace mineral. I had to bring the bottle with the label on it to prove to him, because he thought it was a poison. It actually isn't.
You're paying him $300 an hour to be there. It's mind-boggling. I just don't understand it. I really don't. There's so many people out there who don't go to doctors, who live holistically, who live off their gardens, that are healthier than all of their neighbors put together, and are going to outlive the so-called doctor.
Right.
It's really, really something worth looking at, and I can't explain to people enough. That there's more to this than they're allowing us to see. Because there are a lot of people out there who don't run for the immediate flu shot, that are healthier than everybody else.
Oh, exactly. And that, I don't get my flu shot anymore. But when I showed him this, he finally admitted, he said, well, if it's helping, continue doing what you're doing, And so I wouldn't be surprised, and I hope he would go and research it, because that's the only way that they're going to get educated on this, if they do the research themselves.
Right. There's some great doctors out there that are available, that can be found online, that are helping with this, and they're dietary doctors. What's the one? Ben Fuchs. And he's educated himself on all of this, and he's learned the dietary side of this, and he is seeing tremendous benefits from changing people's diets. As much as he's there to be a doctor, he's seeing the difference. And he's being ridiculed by his peers, but at the same time, right. And we can go right back into our gardens and make that difference. And
that's what you said, stepping out of the box and just doing. We have to take initiative and step it up and grow our own gardens, and we'll save money in the process.
Oh God, a boatload of money. Oh my God, when you stop grocery shopping and you have excess to give to your neighbors, or in a homesteader situation, you have excess to sell. You're selling them something that's going to make them healthier. They're going to come back. It's not going to be you have to chase your customers. They're going to come back, because they're not going to feel anywhere near as good eating this food out of your garden, following my system, even your own garden for that matter, because you're not running for the GMOs, you're not running for the chemicals. If you're going at it organically, you're going to be producing better products.
Well,
and
you know what?
Pay a high dollar for that.
Yeah, you know what? I'm going to tell you something because actually I want to say this in reference to what we've been talking about here. I'm looking at an article online that I saw just earlier, a little bit earlier. I saw an article that was on NPR, and I wanted to read a portion of this because this ties into the heart and soul of everything that we're talking about here this evening. And the article was written a couple of days ago from out of NPR, and it says, "Bad diets are responsible for more deaths than smoking, a global study finds." Okay? And this person writes, she says here, about 11 million deaths a year are linked to poor diet around the globe. What's driving this? As a planet, we don't eat enough healthy foods, including whole grains, nuts, seeds, fruits, and vegetables. And at the same time, we consume too many sugary drinks, too much salt, and too much processed food. As part of a new study published in The Lancet, researchers analyzed the diets of people in 195 countries using survey data as well as sales data and household expenditure data. Then they estimated the impact of poor diets on the risk of death from diseases including heart disease, certain cancers, and diabetes. This study shows that poor diet is the leading risk factor for deaths in the majority of the countries in the world, says the study author of the Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation at the University of Washington. Now, which countries do best when it comes to diet? And it states here, Israel, France, Spain, and Japan were among the countries with the lowest rates of diet-related disease. The U.S. ranked 43rd, and China ranked 140th. It should be noted that there were data gaps for intake of key foods in some countries, or some estimates could be off. And it said, to finish this off, generally the countries that have a diet close to the Mediterranean diet, which has a higher intake of fruits, vegetables, nuts, and healthy oils, including olive oil and omega-3 from fish, are the countries where we see the lowest number of diet-related deaths. As they've reported, the Mediterranean pattern of eating is linked to a reduced risk of heart attacks and memory decline. Now, it's funny because I saw this article earlier in the evening, and here we are talking about being able to grow healthy food, okay?
Yeah.
And I'm sure that these folks probably have not seen your book, okay? I mean, this article was just written a few days ago. They probably have not seen your book. And yet, they are mentioning things in here that validate a lot of what you say in your book, okay? You know, about being able to eat healthier, being able to connect the dots, so to speak, with healthy living, which you get from a healthy garden. And this is interesting, okay? This is very, very interesting as far as what they're finding out, okay? That, you know, this is linked to, you know, and I suspect that it's not just the diet, but probably the food source itself, okay? I mean, the diet is a big part, but it's the food source itself that's probably also a culprit in this.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, somebody please explain to me how we're getting fresh bananas and fresh pineapples and fresh tomatoes in the middle of a snowstorm.
You're
Anywhere
not.
in the country. Right. Unless greenhouse bound, running on water, and doing it aquatically, and living on nothing but nitrogen from fish feces. Only enhancing something from another country that is taking time to get here, and then putting it through a baking process to artificially turn a banana yellow. Is it actually a healthy banana? Is it actually a healthy anything?
No, you bring up bananas, you know, and there's a banana tea that you can make, but they only recommend organic bananas.
But you can only get those certain kinds of years.
Yeah, because you can only because when you make it, you have to use the skin and all, and you can't do that with these GMO bananas. These these
right,
chemically
enhanced, what have
induced.
you.
Yeah.
You know, when they spray a chemical on a pile of bananas to make them ripen, because we're ingesting whatever the end result is.
And you
There's
know,
no way
people
that's
think
healthy.
that by cleaning the vegetable on the outside, that
No.
they're getting rid of all the toxins. What they don't understand is that those vegetables are absorb that chemical inside of it. So you're not ever going to get rid of it. You're going to actually eat it.
In a GMO crop, those chemicals are genetically engineered to directly absorb into the plant and come out in the fruits and vegetables that we're eating. It's forced growth, like a hormone. It's absolutely terrible for you, just like meat and cattle. You know, being stuck in these weird farms where 100 cattle are being raised on an acre of property, and they're being forced to all these hormones. They can't move. They're huge, but they're being sold for their weight.
Right.
There's no muscle mass.
Well, some meat is being imported from China. So if it's being imported from China, who knows what
there's no regulation
being done to the meat.
Yeah,
So
there's hardly any
meat.
oversight to that.
If you're going to buy your meat, buy it from an organic, directly from the farm itself, because you don't know what's been done to that meat. You don't know how it's been processed. You don't know what stuff has been put into it.
And I don't want to be disparaging to anybody on these levels, because I don't think we've spent enough time in the aquatics. I don't think enough time has been spent in the research. I have a very sneaky suspicion that were we to take some of my process and find a way to suspend that in the water or suspend that in the growing medium and give the food web a chance to establish itself, we could be getting those fresh fruits and vegetables in the middle of winter.
Kind of like hydroponics.
Yeah. But right now, everybody is abandoning it because no one is doing the research, which is why I really hope my book gets out there, because I have so much I want to research before I put out the second book.
Well, and
the second book bases its. Go ahead.
No. Go ahead, please. Go ahead.
What is your second book
bases
about?
Itself, it is strictly on gardens and garden soil and garden building. See, a lot of people don't know there's a rainforest. It's an incredible rainforest that man is depleting, man is wiping out, man is destroying. Turns out it's a 4,000-year-old man-made forest.
Man-made?
That has man-made. The soils in the Amazon are so bad, nothing grows in the actual soil. But in the rainforest, where it was all, and it's all being scientifically researched. I don't have the whole recipe together yet. That's one of those things I want to research in the book and get in touch with those college professors that are down there and maybe even go there myself to look at the Terra Preta myself, get my hands in it and find out what's going on, that this stuff reproduces itself year after year in not inches, but in feet. They will go in and scrape off 3 feet. They will come back 2 years later, and that 3 feet has reproduced itself, and they add nothing to these beds. Can you imagine having something that rich, that wholesome in your backyard, growing your plants and growing your garden, where you have to do nothing? I mean, if it's producing a rainforest, a man-made rainforest, can you imagine what it would do for your garden? Can you imagine what it would do for the local farms? If we could reproduce what man had already done 4,000 years ago, right in our things around.
I think if they got a hold of your book, Ron, it would revolutionize how people did things.
I hope.
Well,
I hope so.
Yeah, I hope so. And let me ask you this question: using your principles, okay, with gardening, is it possible to grow a different variety of stuff where you're kind of off the beaten path? Like, for instance, most of the times, at least here in the United States, people have a garden in their yard and they're used to like, well, okay, I can only grow tomatoes or I can only grow, this, that, or the other. But if they were to take your principles and do it, would they be able to actually literally plant anything and it would have a really good shot at actually growing regardless of what the climate is?
Absolutely, because you're changing the soil conditions.
Because yeah, I see what Rudy's saying, because certain, you know how they number the growing zones of certain
Right, we have our grow
areas
regions,
of the country.
and those are more temperature and arid controls versus the type of plants we're talking about. You're actually going into like 2 different areas, almost 3 different areas in gardening in a singular question and not realizing it. When you're talking temperate, arid regions, yes, you can grow things that have a longer grow season in the lower parts of the 48. That's not to say that we can't grow them up here. The soil conditions aren't equal at all, but the temperature variables are what cause the grow regions. But once we start changing the soil conditions, we're more conducive to producing things stronger, healthier, and faster. And those grow regions may no longer take effect. So will you get a hybrid off your property? Yes, because as your tomatoes cross-pollinate with each other, or as your raspberries cross-pollinate with each other under these conditions, you're going to cause your own hybrid that's not available anywhere else, that is only going to be growing on your property. So what you're saying is theoretically that even though traditionally we know that oranges come out of Florida, okay, that's where they grow all the oranges, okay, right. That it's possible to grow an orange tree up in New England if the soil is right. It's very, very possible, because once you give it the correct soil conditions and the conditions are thriving and it's drawing the heat from the planet, you could very well get earlier in the season than normal. Well, there you go, right there. There you go. Mother Nature does some very spectacular things. I mean, we've got, go up into Alaska. We've got areas up there that are growing over top of ice, and they come back every year. They freeze over every year, and that's why we have these huge herds of elk up there roaming around, because the greenery is there growing on top of ice. Anything's possible in Mother Nature. If we give it the correct conditions, we could very well find anything growing anywhere. They're growing bananas over in Norway, which is one of the coldest places possible. But because of some of the thermogenic properties they have over there in the soil conditions, they're growing them in the middle of winter. Bananas. That's amazing. That is absolutely amazing.
See, I had always thought, and this is why I asked the question, I didn't know it was asking 3 things at once, but I always thought that those those zones for growing was you can only, certain things would only grow in certain areas, or that's what I was led to believe. Right, those are temperate zones. Those are just your temperature basic variable grow zones. Obviously, you shouldn't be planting potatoes in the middle of a snowstorm. Right. That's kind of one of those variables, but that's like I get approached a lot of times going, I have sandy soil. How's this going to help? Well, let's stop and really think this through. They're doing the research now, and right out there in the middle of the desert over in Egypt, they're growing farms in the sand, because they have discovered that through a slight combination of certain particled clay under certain mineral conditions mixed with the sand, they're actually able to begin growing full-scale gardens right out in the middle of the desert. Anything is possible. You think nothing. Yeah, well, that was one of my questions early on, but you kind of answered that about desert area, can you grow anything in the desert? And you just kind of answered that without me asking.
Well, I'm going to tell you that I appreciate the book that you've written. Okay, and I once again a pitch to everybody that's listening. I know we have several listeners that are quite a few listeners that are listening to the program. I am telling you that if you purchase this book, The Green Wizard, that is money well spent. Okay.
Well, and let me step up just a little hard on that, because they wanted this for look. I got help putting this together, and they wanted this book earmarked it anywhere between $25 and $30, and I absolutely refused and said no. There's no way. Yes, I put time into this. I've got 5 years of my life into this book and getting it down to this point, getting it this entertaining, what have you. I don't need to make a fortune here. Let's cover all the costs. Let's make this thing affordable, and let's put this thing out there at a $15 bookmark. Because it doesn't, as much as it contains so much more information than a lot of the $300 college manuals on understanding the food web, there is no reason for us to be paying that kind of money for a book. This is old information. I'm just bringing it back. I'm just putting it back in print. So it's a $15 book, everybody. This is not something that's extremely expensive. And I believe, and Tara, please correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that the ebook is half that.
Yeah, usually
it's about, it was about that.
Well, all I can say is this, that folks, it's an investment that's well worth it. Trust me, you'll pay more at Wendy's getting a meal for you and your family, okay, than you'll pay for this book. And the benefit will be 20-fold, 100-fold that you'll get out of it. And I eagerly anticipate looking for your next book. And best of luck, putting that together, and teach us, what we need to know with how to make a successful garden.
Oh, anytime. And please feel free. Get a hold of me on my .com, greenwizardguide.com. There's an email address there. There's an email Autobot system set up. Nothing goes out that I don't approve. It is not a weekly mailer, what have you, but when something important is coming out or something needs to be said, that is when that will be utilized, because I get too much junk mail as it is. But yeah, you can keep track of me and ask questions and do what you need to do, and get a hold of me through greenwizardguide.com anytime. And
just for the listening audience, where can they order your book again?
It should be on the bookshelves at Barnes & Noble. If it's not, please ask for it. They will get it in immediately. But it's available almost next day now on Amazon, either under my name, Ron Neitzel, or you'll find it under the greenwizardsguide.com, or the Green Wizards Guide.
And Ron, I appreciate that also that you have written this book. And I would recommend it to anybody, whether you're growing a garden or not, or have thought about it. It's good to have, because whether you're a millennial, whether you're a prepper, this is a book that you would keep close to those things. If you're a prepper, you would keep this close to your items of prepping, because you would go back to this again. You could incorporate this. I would guarantee you that you could. For a millennial, this is easy to read. This is not your I guess you could say it's a quick read, because this is not something that you have to spend.
Pages. Yeah, it's not a textbook. It's a 114-page story. It's very quick and very, very fun to read.
Yeah, and I have, like I said, I have both, because I wanted to be able to take the book with me. I mean, the book is small enough. You could take the actual book with you wherever you're going. But for me, I wanted to be able to increase the font size. So that's why and it's not really a small font, but I'm, getting older, and I like the
I understand.
bigger font.
Well, and I did run with a little bit bigger font because I'm aware of that.
Yeah.
I have older readers that want to be able to enjoy a book without having to struggle, and I deliberately ask for a larger font than your normal book.
Right.
Again, this is a small page count.
Yeah, this is, if you're a woman, this little book could fit right in your purse. A man, you could
Throw it in your bug out
tuck it
bag.
in your coat. Yeah, bug out bag. This is something that you want to keep close. And whether you're a millennial, whether you're an older person, whether you're, because whether you're a prepper, this is something that this is a treasure that you are not soon going to get tired of. This is something that you are going to go back to time and time again. And Ron, I can't recommend this enough. I can't recommend what you did, and I look forward to your next book. And we'll have you on when you get your next book again too. We'll have you on for this again too, but we'll have you on for your next book as well. So, and I want everybody.
Thank you. And anytime you want to have me on for even the green side of something, feel free to give me a call, and I'll gladly make some time to be here.
And we have a few minutes left, so is there anything you want to say in closing, Ron?
I just appreciate what you guys are doing because, a lot of people need to hear this stuff. And I appreciate the time that you devoted to me and allowed me to speak about the book. And I'm really happy I was able to answer your questions this evening.
Well, and we appreciate that. I appreciate that. This is something that's important, and I feel that it needed the attention, and I just have a good feeling about it. And I think once people see the importance of this, I can see it catching on really quickly, and I have no doubt that it won't.
And the faster we get this book out, the faster we can make the changes. It's
Exactly.
My intention to just basically change this world 1 yard at a time.
Remember, everybody, listen with your eyes and watch with your ears. And this is Ron Musical with The Green Wizard Sky. Get it on Amazon, Barnes and Noble. So,
see you later, everybody.
Get the book while we've read it. Good night, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.